Hey everybody, what's happening here? Brent Axe from syracuse.com, and we're back, baby. Facebook Live here after Syracuse. What a game. Everybody all caught up. You get some exhales out. You're breathing okay. What a wild opening game for the Syracuse football team. It's a win. They beat Western Michigan 55-42 to start the 2018 season 1-0 with that win in Kalamazoo against former Syracuse offensive coordinator Tim Lester, former Syracuse defensive coach Tim Doust, and a whole lot of former Orangemen on the Western Michigan side. Syracuse with a commanding 34-7 lead at halftime. Everything's going great. Everybody's breathing easy. And then Dino Babers pulls Eric Dungey. Maybe a little earlier than he should. The Syracuse defense struggles. Western Michigan storms right back into this game. 34-28 in the blink of an eye. Eric Dungey comes back out. There was some speculation about whether or not Eric Dungey was hurt or not hurt. Eric Dungey comes back out. Syracuse wins 55-42. So a lot between point A and point B in the start of this game, and let's discuss it all here. So you guys get in the comment section. I'll hop in there and answer some of your questions and comments as we go along here. I want to thank our friends at Krause Health. Where are we here? Woo, right there, for sponsoring our Facebook Live here today. And we'll be here after every Syracuse football game throughout the season here on the Syracuse football Facebook page on syracuse.com. So make it a habit. Come on by after every game. We did this after all the football games and all the basketball games last season. Love the conversations. Love having you guys here. So make it a habit to come on back here. Summer went by quick, didn't it? You know, New York State Fair is still going on here in Syracuse, and you know, it's Labor Day weekend, so we'll squeeze in those last days of summer. But come Tuesday, day after Labor Day, you kind of flip that switch, right? Kids go back to school, and, you know, we're kind of out of the summertime. So I hope you guys enjoy your last few days of summer here, and you'll get to enjoy a Syracuse win, that's for sure. But what a wild game that it was. So 55-42 is the final score. Syracuse with 560 total yards in this game. Western Michigan with 621, which speaks to some issues that this Syracuse defense still has to work out. Eric Dungey sets an ACC and Syracuse record for individual rushing yards in a single game by a quarterback. 15 carries, 200 yards for Eric Dungey in this game, and he didn't even play the whole game. As we saw, Tommy DeVito got some time in this one, as we'll certainly discuss. Mo Neal with 82 yards and a couple touchdowns. Dante Strickland had a couple touchdowns, just 38 yards on the ground, but a couple of red zone touchdowns for him. Jamal Custis, as Syracuse looks to find who's that next guy, who's the next Amba Editawu, Steve Ishmael, Irv Phillips, kind of top receiver in the Dino Babers offense in year three. Jamal Custis said, hey, maybe it's me. With 6 catches for 168 yards, 2 touchdowns, had an incredible one-handed grab in this game. A couple of great catches, including that one-handed grab for the Orange. So good news on that front. For Western Michigan, John Wassing finished with 379 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a couple of picks. Bellamy with 120 yards rushing, including a 64-yard touchdown run. Jamari Bogan had 68 yards. I keep wanting to say Darrell Eskridge because, of course, he played at Syracuse, but Eskridge for Western Michigan, 8 catches, 240 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Really torched that Syracuse secondary in this game. So those are some of the numbers. Just to throw a few more at you here, Syracuse ran 90 total plays for those 560 yards. Western Michigan 64 plays for those 621 yards. So they got a lot more bang for their buck there. Syracuse averaged 20 yards per catch in this game. Eric Dungey, 15 attempts for 200 yards on the ground. He averaged 13 yards every time he ran the football in this game. So some eye-popping numbers for sure. But the one thing that everybody will certainly be talking about after this game is the decision by Dino Babers to bench Eric Dungey when he did. And you could kind of see why he did when he did. It's 34-7. You're rolling. You've got a quarterback who's got a history of injury. Tommy DeVito has really pushed Eric Dungey throughout camp. They want to get Tommy DeVito some reps. They want to show that, you know, he's the future quarterback for the Syracuse football team. And it was right before halftime, and there was speculation that maybe Dungey was injured. There was a play when he was running towards the end zone. He kind of led with his shoulder, and after that he was gone. And then there was speculation from CBS Sports Network. They interviewed Dino Babers at halftime. Dino insisted that he was not injured. but Eric Dungey's out, and Western Michigan's coming back, and they're coming back, and it's 34-7. Then it's 34-14. Then it's 34-21. You're like, okay, you got to put Eric Dungey back in this game, but Dino Babers didn't. 34-28 they score. And I'm openly wondering, as many of you are, if Eric Dungey's hurt, because it's happened before. And why would you not put your quarterback in with Western Michigan, providing a lot of momentum and getting back in this football game? I had a sports information official from Syracuse text me and say that Eric Dungey is not injured. So I reported that. And there's my dog. Can you hear her out there? She loved that game. It was exciting. So look, Dungey was not hurt, as we found out. He comes back in the game. All 55 points in this game were scored with Eric Dungey at quarterback. So Tommy DeVito looked good in the sense of his arm strength was great. He looked good in the sense that, maybe down the road here, and you're playing Wagner next week. The biggest mistake that Dino Babers made in putting Tommy DeVito in this game when he did is that you're playing Wagner next week. You can back off, you can take Dungey out, you can be safe about his reps in the second half when it's safe. Now, the lesson here is you cannot take your foot off the gas pedal in a football game. You're up 34-7. You got the momentum. I understand the need to say, okay, wait a minute. We don't want our quarterback to get hurt. We want him to be ready to go. But, man, you're playing Wagner next week. Tommy DeVito's going to get time. He's going to play in that game. So for some reason, when DeVito is in and Dungey is out, the defense forgot how to tackle. The defense fell apart, and that's easy to kind of put together because when Dungey's on the field, this team gets points. This team gets sustained drives that end in points. When DeVito was out there, he didn't have the sustained drives. The defense got tired, and we saw the problem there. So, look, that is the issue with this football team right now. The defense. We know this team can score. We know this team has an offense. We saw the skill position guys out there tonight. Jamal Custis looks great. Devin Butler struggled. We've heard throughout camp that Devin Butler was kind of the number one guy. We heard that Dino Babers labored him the bell cow, right? Not tonight. Devin Butler, I'll take a look at his numbers just to kind of pan it out here. You know what? I don't even think he made a catch in this game, right? Because he's not in my stats here. A few drops in this game. So that's concerning. He had a drop right in the red zone. We had a nice cut route, dropped the ball. So, it's only game one. Everybody's working out the kinks. But he was the guy that was kind of seen as the number one. But clearly Jamal Custis is making a play for that number one receiver spot here. So, look, we knew the offense is what it is. Thankfully, it seems that Eric Dungey is not hurt, because why else would you sit a guy for that long and not put him in with Western Michigan coming back into it? So now it's a balancing act. Now we know that Dino Babers, and we'll see what he says in postgame coming up here, and I think he's got to own it. I think he's got to say, I made a mistake. I pulled my quarterback too early. Lesson learned. We want Tommy DeVito to develop. We think Tommy DeVito is a good quarterback, but clearly we made a mistake here. I don't know what Dino's saying in postgame right now because I'm talking to you guys, but he better own this, and he better say that because you made a mistake. And, it's a good thing to learn that early in the season. We'll see Tommy next week against Wagner, and that's fine once Syracuse builds what should be a big lead in that game. And the defensive issues that this team had today, look, I'll give them credit where due. So when the fourth quarter comes, you needed your defense to make stops. Kendall Coleman made a big stop early in the fourth quarter, a couple of turnovers, a couple of interceptions for that Syracuse defense. But clearly they got problems. Clearly, Brian Ward has a lot to work on the defensive end. So what a wild game to open up the 2018 season. Long game as well. It kicked off just past 6 o'clock. There was a lengthy delay at one point because a Western Michigan player hurt his neck, and they wanted to be sure and brought out the stretcher and all that. But a 4-hour football game to start the season. When you have all those points and all those scoring drives, it stalls. I thought baseball was the sport that had the pace of play issues, right? Now, apparently, football's got it too, especially when there's a lot of scoring there. So let's see what you guys are saying in here. Appreciate you coming by, as always. Would love to get your comments and your questions here in the comment section as we continue along here on Facebook Live, presented by our friends at Krause Health. Bottom line, Syracuse is 1-0. I'm going to take the leap of faith and say that they go 2-0 next week against Wagner. And then you got Florida State at home. And what we've seen the last 2 years in the Dino Babers era is what? Upsets. Virginia Tech in year one, and, of course, the big one against Clemson last year. Those were both at home. A lot of people look at Florida State as that potential team that could spring the upset, that Syracuse could spring the upset on, I should say. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves here with this defense. Obviously having to plug some leaks, and Florida State's still pretty darn good. I know their season fell apart last year. Jimbo Fisher's now at Texas A&M, but DeAndre Francois is back at quarterback. They've got a terrific set of running backs, Cam Akers included, and they're Florida State. They've got athletes all over the field. And, look, Syracuse beat Clemson last year, but a big part of that was they knocked their starting quarterback out of the game, and, the dominoes fell from there. But as we saw tonight, football is weird. Weird things happen. Syracuse has to start the year 3-1, though. Got this win tonight. You get Wagner next week. Try and hold your own against Florida State. And then you got to beat Connecticut at home and kind of go into that middle part of your schedule. And you got to win some games in the ACC that you didn't win last year. You got to win up, if you will. You got to try and find those wins. North Carolina and NC State back-to-back at home. Beat a Wake Forest on the road. Beat a Pittsburgh, right? If you don't get the upsets, but you take care of business this year if you're Syracuse and find yourself to 6 wins, that's a bowl game. And that's a clear, tangible step forward. We saw signs of it, of course, with the upsets, but we've also seen the defense just completely fall apart in the last 2 seasons. And what we saw tonight was a defense that needs a whole lot of work. There's some stars on that defense. I like that Antoine Cordy's back. Chris Slayton, is an NFL-level player. He got some pressure on the quarterback tonight and forced a fumble, forced a bad throw, I should say, an interception on Western Michigan's quarterback, John Wasink. But the linebackers are brand new. The secondary, maybe not as strong as some people anticipated. They're running that 4-2-5 defense, trying to, put their best personnel out there based on the holes that they have at linebacker at this point. But clearly a lot of work to be done there. So you guys have been chatting along here in the comments. Let's dig in there, see what you're saying. Tom's saying the secondary is the biggest disappointment. The kicking game is the best surprise. I'm glad you brought that up, Tom. We were surprised because it was supposed to be Sterling Hoffrichter, who was going to pull double duty. He was going to be the punter and the place kicker, but the freshman got in there, and his name is escaping me at the moment. Pardon me for that. We'll look it up while we're yakking about it here. But the freshman gets in there, and, not only does he hold his own on a couple of short field goals and on some extra points, but he had a 43-yard field goal in this game. So credit where it's due. That's something that Syracuse kept real quiet. Smith is his name, the freshman. We were just kind of assuming Sterling Hoffrichter was going to be the guy. The media only gets to watch about 10 minutes of practice, and we rarely saw any special teams work. And nobody really disputed the fact that Sterling Hoffrichter was going to pull double duty, but here we get to tonight, and you got a freshman that held his own. So, Tom, I'm glad you brought that up. That was a pleasant surprise, and hopefully that continues because, let's be honest, it was kind of an adventure when Cole Murphy came out there last year. You just never knew which Cole Murphy you were going to get. Chris says, so at halftime, Babers pats himself on the back and Lester adjusted. Babers' dream that Syracuse was just a step away to the big time isn't turning out so good. Well, you got to adjust that defense if that's going to be the case. I want to give you a few numbers on defense here. And look, you can manipulate numbers the way you want, but these are some interesting trends. And I want to thank David Hale from ESPN and a couple of people that sent these trends out there today. So Syracuse has allowed 35 points for the 12th time since Dino Babers arrived in 2016. Now, this is an unfair comparison because it's Alabama, but I'll just point this out to you. Alabama has allowed 35 points 11 times total in Nick Saban's tenure at Alabama. Just goes to show you, Bama's Bama. Again, it's unfair to throw that out there, but shows you that the rate that Syracuse is giving up big-time points on defense. This is the 7th time that Syracuse has allowed 600-plus yards in just 25 games under Dino Babers. The Orange allowed 600-plus yards only 3 times total from 2000 to 2015. And let's throw one more at you here. This is more recent. Syracuse has allowed 204 points in its last 4 games. 5 teams have surrendered fewer points during the entirety of last season. So just to throw some more things in there that shows you the defense has some big, big problems and has some work to do. Joe says season's optimism is out the window with the way this defense continues to play. He thinks they could be 4-8 again. Danny going the other way, saying this is a great win for Syracuse. I think you can look at this one of 2 ways. You can say a win's a win, and I don't care how they got there. They held their own. They fixed their mistake. They put Eric Dungey back in the football game. or you can say, okay, they won this game. They'll certainly beat Wagner next week. But if you're going to get to a bowl game, as Joe pointed out, if you're going to get past that 4-8 mark that they've been the past 2 seasons, the defense has to make some plays, and the defense has to fix itself. I think a lot of people were, putting Brian Ward, the defensive coordinator, on the hot seat at the end of last season. And, if this defense continues to, tonight you gave up 600-plus yards to Western Michigan. And, I like Tim Lester, and I like what he's building there. I think he's going to build a heck of a program. Western Michigan has had 8 players drafted in the last 3 seasons. Syracuse has only had 2 in the last few seasons. So, look, Western Michigan's no slouch here. They're a good, solid MAC team. You can't give up 621 yards in game 1. You just cannot keep this up. You've got to fix the leak here. Brian Ward has got some work to do, and to be fair, again, you got some linebackers that are new, but you got to go with what you got. You've got a defensive line that's got some talented guys, Alton Robinson, Chris Slayton, Kendall Coleman, who made a big play in the fourth quarter, where credit's due. Certainly the secondary has got to step up, and Antoine Cordy can't do everything. He can't make all the plays, and even he struggled a little bit tonight. We've put so much emphasis on Antoine Cordy, and that's fair to point out because I think he's an important player, but he's played like 2 quarters of football in 2 years. He's a game breaker when he's healthy. That guy makes plays at practice that are unbelievable, but he can't do everything. They're running that 4-2-5 and kind of putting him, in basically his own position in that defense, but you need some other guys to step up. Scoop Bradshaw got torched a bunch tonight. Chris Frederick struggled at times tonight. Everybody in that secondary. Andre Cisco, the starting freshman, made an interception early in the game, and it was a bobbled pass, and he was in the right place at the right time. But that secondary, coaches always say, the biggest adjustment you make is between week 1 and week 2. So let's hope that secondary and that defense is the result of that adjustment, and let's hope that Dino Babers, says, I made a mistake. I put in Tommy DeVito too early. It swung the momentum of the game the wrong way. That was a bad coaching decision, and you learn from your mistakes. Now, again, Wagner's next week, and DeVito should play a bunch in that game. But, lesson learned here tonight. Jerry saying that Dungy came close to some unsportsmanlike conducts. You don't need those penalties from your starting quarterback. I think that's a fair point, Jerry, because I think people love the fire that Dungy has. They love the competitiveness that he has. When DeVito came in, even before halftime, Eric Dungy looked like he ate some bad fish. Like he was not happy that he was pulled out of that game. But you've got to be competitive to a point. You can't be talking smack on the sideline. There was a play where he ran into the Western Michigan sideline, and he was talking junk with those guys. The unsportsmanlike penalty. Syracuse had a player tossed out of this game, as did Western Michigan. You've got to harness that energy. You've got to harness that competitiveness in the right fashion. Eric Dungy is a senior, and he's got to watch himself in that case. Football is an emotional game, and I get all that. It's easy for us to say where we sit, but you're a captain, you're a leader, you're a senior. You've got to lead by example there. Kevin says, first game, defense looked good for half the game. Let's get off the ledge. Pretty sure they slacked a little because of the big lead. Well, I think that's the lesson. I think the lesson is you got to keep your foot on the gas pedal until you feel safe. 34-7 at the time felt safe because Western Michigan was a mess and the defense was making plays, and Western Michigan couldn't stay on the field. But football is weird, man, as we've seen. Remember that Syracuse-Pittsburgh game a couple years ago at the end of the season, 76-61? I thought we were going to break that record tonight at the rate this game was going. So lesson learned, knowing your defense cannot hold more often than not. They did when they needed to in the fourth quarter. Again, we'll give credit where it's due. And they did have a good first half for the most part. But when you got Eric Dungy rolling, you got an offense, at least, make it 42-7, 49-7 before you feel comfortable that you can lay off the gas pedal here. Because we saw a team get right back in this thing very quickly, especially on the road. Especially on the road, when those things can certainly happen. You felt like you took the crowd out of it and had momentum, but, home teams get back in football games that quick. Joe saying that the quarterback needs to be smart, period, no excuses. Yeah, I would agree with that. Like we said, Eric Dungy's got to watch himself out there. He's a fiery guy. The guy's doing kung fu moves out there. And remember the kick last year? And you want your quarterback to lead your troops, and these guys are inspired by him. Now, Tommy DeVito, it's one game. He's a redshirt freshman. I am not going to make any swift judgments here. And again, he's going to play a lot against Wagner next week and get those reps that he needs. It's weird in college football. You don't get the preseason game, to get the reps, to get the blood flowing. They just changed the redshirt rule, which finally, way overdue. Tommy didn't get to take advantage of that, but it would have been great if Tommy could have come in last year, got some reps in some of those games, and got the feel of it, because the new redshirt rule is that you can play in up to 4 games and not lose your redshirt status. It used to be if you played 1 snap, you'd lose your redshirt status, which was just absurd. That was like when they changed that rule, you look at it and you say, man, why didn't we change this years ago? But at least that's changed now, and you can get those backup quarterbacks in there. You can get those guys some reps. Timmy says the defense did not take their foot off the gas pedal. Total coverage breakdowns over and over again. Just can't happen. I completely agree with that. I think that John Wassink's a pretty good quarterback. He's coming off an injury as well. You know, Tim Lester's a good offensive coach, and they're going to find some holes in the Syracuse defense. But, you know, you kind of look ahead. We brought up – you got Florida State in 2 weeks. Okay, Florida State, they're going to find those holes in the defense. They have speed guys that are just going to run you over if you give them that much, right? You got Connecticut coming up. You've got – I'm trying to think of some other really good quarterbacks that are on Syracuse's schedule as we go down the road here, because Lamar Jackson moved on, at least a couple of players that, you know, Syracuse has had to put up with in recent years is gone. NC State's got a really good quarterback. Ryan Finley's back there. So, you know, it's a mix of good quarterbacks and teams that Syracuse certainly should beat. But when you've got coverage breakdowns like that, Timmy, on your point, you make average quarterbacks look much, much better than they are. You can't count on the linebackers yet. We're trying to figure out. And there was Bellamy had a couple of runs right up the gut, couple of plays where the linebackers just weren't there. So, again, this is all first-game stuff. Let's not get too crazy here, but you got to know what to fix. You got to know what adjustments to make, and these can't become habits. These can't become things the teams take advantage of in Game 8, let alone what Western Michigan did here in Game 1. Tom says, all in all, this was a great game, good win, quality snaps for DeVito. Dungy didn't get hurt. Quality play by true and redshirt freshmen. Exposed secondary weakness is the one to focus on. Rob saying Lester was ready to attack the gaps of the defense all night. It took him and his team a little while to get their feet wet before they got going. Too many big gaps on the field for them to attack throughout the night. They were able to begin maneuvering the defense to spring Eskridge loose. Yeah, he had 240 yards in this game. Big concern going forward. It is a concern. That's one of those concerns. I think you look at some other positions, you look at some other things out of Game 1, you say, okay, well, they have the depth or the talent to overcome that. I'm wondering about the secondary, because all I heard throughout camp, our buddy Julian Wiggum, who I talk to on the radio a lot, and you know he's biased because he's a secondary guy himself, but heard a lot of great things about the secondary. And with Cordy back and, you know, Bradshaw and a bunch of these guys getting a year older, and Cisco coming in as a freshman and starting, but obviously there's a lot of work to be done there. John saying, wonder how long Ward will last if we have any more of these type of defensive breakdowns. John, that's a fair question, because the pattern has been over the past 2 seasons and now this game that your defense just wilts, that those coverage breakdowns are there. We don't see the adjustments. We don't see, you know, closing those gaps and fixing those holes that are there defensively. You got to have the talent to do that, and maybe Syracuse doesn't have the talent to do that at certain positions. But you look at last year and all the plays that Zaire Franklin and Jonathan Thomas and Paris Bennett had to make to overcome the lack of depth up front and the trouble you had at secondary. Now you got a little more depth up front, as Dino Babers likes to say. You got the hippos, you got the big players. We mentioned some of the names, Coleman and Alton Robinson and Chris Slayton. You know, one thing this defense has got to do while we're spending a lot of time on the defense, turnovers. They had a couple in this game, so that's encouraging, but they were one of the I want to say they were in the hundreds. Like, they were a very, very low-ranked team last season in creating turnovers. So we got to see this defense take some chances, get some turnovers. They did it tonight with Slayton getting some pressure on the quarterback. We mentioned that Cisco was in the right place at the right time. So at least they're showing signs that maybe they can create some more turnovers. That's going to be big for this team. And there's really not a lot to think about next week. William asking, final score, 55-42, Syracuse with the win, my man. Look, they play Wagner next week. And, you know, in a perfect world, you reverse course. Like last year, Syracuse started with Central Connecticut State, but then they lost to Middle Tennessee State the next week. So even this plan can blow up in your face. But college football is just there's so much more pressure on you because I mentioned you don't get the preseason game. You just got to come out game one ready to go in the first half. That's what it looked like for Syracuse. It's 34-7. They're rolling. The defense is making plays. Dungy's looking great. And then, boom, a coaching decision can change the momentum, and it did. It clearly did. That was a boo-boo on Dino Babers' part here. So we'll see how that works going forward. We'll see what he says about that, how this team adjusts going forward. There were a lot of encouraging things, as we mentioned, some of the names, Jamal Custis breaking out as a number one receiver. I'd like to see Syracuse run the football more with their running backs. As great as it is that Dungy can take off and run and get those big gains, take them while they're there. He set an ACC record and a Syracuse record tonight. I think you want to see your running game establish itself more. Mo Neal getting a couple touchdowns, Strickland getting some carries. I think you want to see that momentum carry over, especially with an offensive line, which had its moments tonight. DeVito was under pressure a few times, and Dungy was as well. But is as experienced and as good an offensive line as Syracuse has had here in a while, particularly with the addition of Coda Martin from Texas A&M, of course, who was the coach's son-in-law, believe it or not. All right, so what do you say we wrap it up for tonight? Appreciate you guys coming by. Look for my recap on syracuse.com. It'll be out. We're speaking here Friday night. It'll be out Saturday morning. All of our coverage here on syracuse.com from Nate Mink and Stephen Bailey and the crew. They'll have some great stuff coming for you from Kalamazoo. We will be back here next week. It's a 3:30 kickoff against Wagner at the Carrier Dome. So we'll be right here on Facebook Live here on the Syracuse Orange football page on syracuse.com after this one. Thanks to our friends at Krause Health. Thanks for coming by. Have yourself a great Labor Day weekend. Enjoy those last few days of summer, right? And then, look, summer's just killing time till football season, kids. And we're here. It's football season. Bottom line, the Orange are 1-0. You got some things to fix on defense, but you score 55 points to overcome that. It's good to have that in your back pocket, too. For now, I'm Brent Axe. Thanks for coming by here on Facebook Live, presented by Krause Health. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you after the Wagner game.